Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Jailed former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak is found guilty of abuse of power in the biggest 1MDB trial to date. The verdict marks a major moment in the multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal and could have significant political impact. South Korea's investigation into the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people is set to miss its one-year deadline for a progress report. Officials say families are still waiting for answers as they continue to demand clarity on what went wrong. The United States says it carried out a strike against Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of the Nigerian government. President Trump and the US military say the group is accused of targeting Christians in the region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a call with US envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff brings new ideas on formats, meetings and timing to move closer to peace. He says he passes Christmas greetings to President Donald Trump as Moscow says it is analysing related proposals. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Zelensky also says that he expects to meet Donald Trump in the near future. He says the planned meetings aims to advance discussions on ending the war. The UAE says it welcomes Saudi Arabia's efforts to support security and stability in Yemen and reaffirms its commitment to backing peace efforts. Saudi Arabia says it remains hopeful that Yemen's main southern separatist group will end its escalation. Japan's government approves a record $785 billion budget as Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi seeks to balance active spending with debt concerns. The administration says it aims to reassure investors amid rising bond yields and a weak yen by limiting new bond borrowing. South Korea's special prosecutor asks for a 10-year prison sentence for ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol over charges linked to his failed martial law bid. Prosecutors say he tried to block arrest in January by barricading himself inside the presidential compound. We move to Europe first, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he plans to meet US President Donald Trump in the coming days. Zelensky and Trump are seeking to align on a 20-point peace plan to present to Russian President Vladimir Putin. While the allies have agreed on most terms, several issues remain unresolved, including Ukraine's opposition to territorial concessions in the eastern region of Donetsk. Meanwhile, Ukraine's deputy prime minister has said that Russian overnight drones have damaged Slovakia, Palau and Liberia-flagged vessels in the ports of Ukraine's Odessa and Mykolaiv regions. The minister has added that there were no casualties, but the attacks caused power cuts in the Odessa region. Joining us now is Mati Zaweg, a geopolitical commentator from He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Mati, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, the United States and Ukraine trying to align on a peace deal to present to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, in regards to the Biden administration, this wouldn't have been a problem to align. However, under Donald Trump, things are very much different. What do you think is going to be pushed by the US president in this meeting? Do you think he's going to keep up the demands for territory, or do you think Donald Trump will let Kyiv choose its territorial integrity itself?
Well, I think it's very clear from the first moment that Trump took the administration that he brought a different kind of view in what must be done. And the view is basically, at any means, we must do peace. We must finish this. because it's good for you and it's good for me too. I mean, it's good for the States too. And he started with his tactics of humiliating Zelensky. So Putin was very pleased with that. But in the meanwhile, it has passed 1 year, 1 year of slowly conquers of the Russians on the ground, more and more villages and area and dams, etc. And they are circumvallating all the eastern parts and cities, big cities from Ukraine. And that's what continued to be. And in this last year also, it has been very clear what is the model on the ground, because the Russians are winning on the ground and the Ukrainians are winning tactical wins, hitting very hard all the drones industries and storage industries and tanks industries and refineries, etc., in the southwest part of Russia, and in Crimea, like 1.5 day ago, that they hit in Mirny, in the Crimean Peninsula, a place that storage all the new drones that the Russians are trying to build. From this point of view, I think that also Russia is an inflex point of having too much collateral damage from their economy and for the continuation of this war. So maybe they are going to change their minds, but not the way they treat Ukrainians or being very generous sitting on a ceasefire or a peace deal. So I think at this point, if Trump is clean, let's say, and he's coming equally for both sides, he's going to say to Putin, that's enough. I understood you continue all this year to conquer several territories. You must stop now, or else you are going to force me to go back to Biden's point of view of massively helping Ukraine against Russia and trying to get a better outcome in the future. So I think something maybe in the middle. They are going to meet maybe in the middle of this kind of views, and they are going to talk about a ceasefire limited maybe, that includes things that can avoid Russia for continuing all their damage on their territory, like in, I said, in Mirny, for instance, but you have in other places, like, for instance, inside Russia, all kind of storage and places that have been hit very hard. And don't forget also that in the last days, important generals have been killed inside Moscow, and you never know where it's coming from. If it's really courageous, I don't know, planning of the Ukrainians, or it's a kind of internal thing that is happening on the highest level in Russia. They are, of course, blaming the Ukrainians.
Yes, indeed. Matti, do stay with us as we have further news coming out of the Middle East this time for our next story. And the United Arab Emirates has expressed support for Saudi Arabia's efforts to bring security and stability to Yemen. This comes after the Southern Transitional Council, backed by the UAE, took control of much of southern Yemen, pushing the Saudi-backed government out of its headquarters in Aden. The STC, which was originally part of the Saudi-led coalition against the Houthi rebels, has now sought self-rule in the south. Saudi Arabia hopes that the STC will back down and pull back its forces from the eastern provinces of Hadramaut and Mara. Meanwhile, Yemen's civil war, which has been raging since 2014, continues to cause devastation, with the Houthis controlling the north, including the capital of Sana'a, and the Saudi-backed government struggling to hold on to the south. This ongoing conflict has raised serious concerns about Yemen's future and the challenges facing regional powers trying to mediate peace. Matti joins us once again. Why is the UAE publicly backing these stability efforts like this, while its ally, the STC, is undermining the Saudi-backed Yemeni government on the ground?
Well, about the UAE, there are sometimes reasons that publicly people don't know. I mean, years ago, more than 10 years ago, the Republic of Yemen has been divided between the Houthis in Sana'a and other places in the north, and in the south, the legally known government from all the world, including the UN, it was also not united. It's a fact that they never helped the international coalition to really fight the Houthis. I mean, they have also their internal problems, and one of them is that the UAE was supporting one of them, the STC, and like in the past, people was very surprised that they were supporting one of the sides in Sudan. If you remember, there was a lot of problems there, and now Saudi Arabia has come to help them in this problem because the South now is divided between the legal government and this STC that has taken place, control, about the Hadramaut refinery and the Al-Mahara, and all these places has to do a lot with Saudi Arabia and Oman because the first one is like hundreds of kilometers in border with Saudi Arabia, and the second one is in the border with Oman. So they are really afraid that all these divisions and internal problems are going to affect also them, and of course are going to affect the possibility of fighting together against the Houthis in the north, that with a lot of difficulties, they have been bombed by coalitions and they have been bombed for years from Saudi Arabia, but in some ways they continue to have a grip on the power in the north, and this is going to do maybe a damage to this country, especially Saudi Arabia, so that's why they are interfering and trying to make them unite in the south against the common enemy in the north.
Yeah, do you think infighting between the Saudi-backed and UAE-backed forces hand the strategic advantage to the Houthis in the region, of course, in the region that they have in its entirety?
Because there is no vacuum. I mean, if you are going to fight between you, maybe someone is going to benefit from that, and this can be the Houthis, that, as I said, with all the problems, are still in some ways by sea or other means continue to receiving weapons from Iran or people that is related with Iran. And also, not every time the coalition is going to come and do a display of all the vessels and bombardment of the north. So if you add to this all what happened in the south, it's a real damage for the big powers in the area, which means Saudi Arabia, Oman, and UAE. But there is always a possibility that they will fight between them because we are talking about big money and oil. And if you know Yemen, I mean, they have nothing. There is a desert with oil and dates. So, you know, basically, of course, they have other things. But this is the main thing, as in Libya, maybe in other places, that if you take control of these places, so you have the power. So I hope that the Saudi efforts will bring some fruit in some accord between them. If not, it's going to be another civil war inside other civil war in a country that has been really castigated with all this.
And Matti, of course, this war has been going on since 2014, 11 years. Do you think we could see diplomatic intervention here, or is the world simply fatigued with Yemen?
Let's see what happened in the history. In these years, especially from 2015, Saudi Arabia has been bombing the Houthis from the air. So they didn't have a good outcome because if you only bomb from the air and you are not on the ground, you are not going to have any exit to this movement. I mean, only doing damage. And this is really very strange that the South never really helped the international coalitions to fight effectively against the Houthis, only maintaining their borders, let's say, in some way. So, I mean, we have seen that also Trump and also Biden, they didn't really interfere with what's happening there unless American interests are on it. I mean, when they really were attacking all the ships in the sea, and they felt that they are going to do a real disruption of all the supplies to the world, even, not only in the area. So they interfere, and they did a kind of accord with the Houthis that they are not going to bomb the Americans. That was really incredible. I mean, they didn't get an accord that they are going to stop, but only not to damage the Americans. So this is a double standard, of course, but only an international coalition led by Trump and maybe UK and others are going to stop this. But also, if there is not going to be a real change in the two governments there, nothing good is going to come from there.
Yes, Mati Zaweg, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to speak to you on these matters. We now move on again, and the Department of Homeland Security has added 27 Ukrainian citizens to its database of detained foreigners and called it the worst of the worst. The database includes dangerous foreign criminals in the past 11 months by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a DHS agency that locates and deports illegal migrants. However, the list includes 27 Ukrainians, more from any other former Soviet state, who were convicted of robbery, fraud, armed assault, drug trafficking and sexual offences. The majority of the citizens on the list are from Latin American countries, which account for many illegal US immigrants, including several thousand Mexicans. We move on now, and silver has surged to $75 an ounce for the first time as gold and platinum also hit record highs. Driven by speculative buying, expectations of US interest rate cuts and rising geopolitical tensions. Spot gold climbed nearly 1% to above $4,500 an ounce after touching a fresh all-time high earlier in the session. Silver jumped almost 4%, briefly topping $75. Analysts say thin year-end trading, a weakened US dollar, and an expectation of prolonged rate cuts are fueling momentum across precious metals. Gold is now back on track for its biggest annual gain since 1979, while silver is up more than 150% this year, far outpacing gold. Platinum also surged more than 9% to a record high, with palladium extending gains as tight supply and strong industrial demands lift prices. With trader pricing in further US rate cuts this year, analysts say non-yielding assets like gold and silver are likely to remain well supported in the months ahead. Okay, we're now joined by Sharad Kohli, a senior economist, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Sharad, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, in this world of geopolitical tensions, among other issues, people fall to precious metals, gold, silver. Why is this happening as of now, Sharad?
Well, greetings, Thomas, to you and NewsX World viewers. I think, yes, indeed, gold seems to be having a gold run at this point of time, and so is silver. Silver is outpacing gold for that matter. Well, the special thing about silver is that there is a lot of industrial demand in silver. The EVs, the solar batteries, and the semiconductor chips. These are the three, products which are using silver for production. So about half of the silver goes into these products. And gold, of course, as you rightly mentioned, geopolitical tensions are helping the cause. We see Russia, Ukraine, the war is aggravated. Tensions between America and Venezuela. Occasional tensions between Thailand and Cambodia. So the world seems to be heading for a war, as they say. So gold and silver love this kind of scenario. And they are enjoying their run for that matter. And of course, as you rightly said, the Fed rate cuts. So every time there's a Fed rate cut, people switch from fixed return investments to investments like gold and silver to protect themselves against inflation and so many other factors. And another important thing, Thomas, which we should not forget is that there is a lot of speculation which goes into gold and silver. There's a commodity market in New York, which is called the COMEX. And there's a commodity market, for example, in India, and then in London, there's a London bullion market also. So in all these countries, most of these countries, shall I say, there are commodity markets where there's a lot of paper trading which is done. We call that as contractual trading. It is also called as the derivative trading. So tons and tons of gold and silver are traded in derivatives markets also. You'll be surprised to know that 80 to 85% of gold and silver trading is not backed by real gold and silver, which means that people need to be careful because in the derivative market, people can take bets either way. So there can be correction. But yes, long-term trends for both these metals seem to be bullish at this point of time. Listening to us, I would advise people to please consult their investment advisor. This is not an investment advice we are giving. But yes, the undertone is bullish. And over a period of time, I'm expecting both gold and silver to be rising. So people who are wanting to invest, they should keep it for a long term and they should do it in smaller pieces. But yes, overall, I think gold and silver are really outshining all the other asset classes at this point of time, Thomas.
Sharad, thank you as always. It's a pleasure having you on the programme, explaining things with such clarity there. We move on now for our next story, and China's market regulator has announced fresh action against what it describes as illegal behaviour in the solar industry. The regulator said it will strengthen enforcement to safeguard fair competition and keep the market in order. China is the world's largest producer of solar panels. However, the sector has been facing problems in recent years. These include price wars over capacity and accusations of unfair pricing that have hurt smaller firms. Authorities have also warned companies against collusion, price manipulation and rule violations. The latest statement signals tighter oversight as Beijing tries to stabilize the industry and ensure long-term growth while keeping competition fair. We move on now, and Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's cabinet has approved a $785 billion budget for the coming fiscal year, aiming to strike a balance between her proactive fiscal policy and debt blowout concerns, limiting new bond issuance. The budget for the year starting from April to be submitted to Parliament early next year will total a record of $784 billion, exceeding this year's initial budget of $737 billion. The Takaichi administration also compiled a record defence budget of over $57.89 billion for fiscal 2026, an increase of 3.8% from the previous year. Meanwhile, the Japanese government spokesperson Minoru Kihara has responded. Let's listen in to what they have to say.
このように令和8年度予算ですが、重要施策に予算を重点化しつつ、財政規律にも配慮し、強い経済の実現と財政の持続可能性を両立させる予算とすることができた、そのように考えているところです。また、防衛力強化など、従来から財源を確保して、複数年度で計画的に取り組んでいる重要政策について、引き続き予算を増やしております。特に GX 半導体については、特別会計において、当初予算を1兆円増額しております。
We stay in East Asia for our next story and move over to the Korean Peninsula, and frustrated relatives of victims of the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people are still demanding answers as a South Korean investigation into the accident is set to miss a one-year deadline to release a progress report. Two officials have said that the country's accident investigation board will not be in a position to release the interim update by the first anniversary, the December the 29th, of the worst aircraft accident in South Korean history. On December the 29th, 2024, the Boeing 737-800 made an emergency belly landing at the Muan airport and overshot the runway and then slammed into a concrete embankment and erupted into a fireball, killing all but 2 people on board. The government-led Aviation and Railway Accident Investigation Board said in a preliminary report in January that both of the plane's engines had sustained bird strikes. The pilot shut off the less damaged engine after the bird strike, investigators said in a July update that was not released publicly due to objections from victims' families.
그냥 이런저런 의심만 더 커지고 있는 것 같아요. 그런 와중에서 1년이 되고 그냥 답답함만 계속 커져가고 있는 것 같아요. 그만큼 시간이 지나면 정말 어떻게 보면 내일이 아니니 기억에서 잊혀지는 건 당연한 것 같고, 근데 한편으로는 제가 이제 입장이 바뀌어서 유가족이 돼 보니 어떻게 이런 사고인데 이게 이렇게 빨리 잊혀질 수가 있지? 그런 좀 되게 이 단어를 뭐라고 표현을 해야 될지 모르겠어요.
Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.